Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Doing Business in Rwanda. My name is Lois Washira. Last week, African Development Bank's annual meeting marking 50 years anniversary was held in Kigali. It attracted leaders from across the continent and the world over to discuss the next 50 years. More about the Africa we want. Doing Business was there to find out about what are some of the issues that African leaders must address in a bid to meet Agenda 2063, and more why Rwanda was chosen as the host of this event for African Development Bank. We spoke to Rwandans and also leaders for more about this world-class event. Ranked as the easiest country to start and do business in Africa, according to the World Bank's 2013 Ease of Doing Business report, it came as no surprise that the African Development Bank chose Rwanda to host this grand event.
Anybody who lands in Rwanda notices a number of things very quickly. The country seems disciplined, the country seems organized, the country is very clean. If many African countries can take just those lessons alone, they are making progress. Once they begin to know more about the country and they hear that you can register a business in 6 hours or in less than 1 day, you can see there's a country that is moving somewhere, and a country that has actually come from a genocide of 20 years ago to a country that is united, or trying to unite anyway, that is interested in regional growth and expansion, allowing businesses to come in and to look at the East African region as a whole area for market development, not just Rwanda itself as a country, because Africa needs to be united.
Youthful, vigorous.
The event brought together leaders from across the continent to discuss what Africa needs to do by the year 2063 to make the most of the continent's economic prospects.
So if we were to project out 15, 20, 30 years, Africa is going to be the story. You look at working age population. By 2035, Africa will have more people of a working age than either India or China. African consumer is already buzzing and alive. You look at 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land being in Africa, so agriculture potential. You look at resources, and you look at the huge requirement for infrastructure, almost $100 billion which needs to go in every year.
In 2040, we expect that the size of the agriculture and agribusiness sector in Africa will be worth $1 trillion. And foreign direct investment into this space will expand from roughly $10 billion today to $45 billion in just 6 years from now. And so really it's about how we unlock that potential and turn that comparative advantage into a competitive advantage. That means that we must begin to look at agriculture as a business. That means that we must get our financial markets to work.
Opening up country borders through infrastructure development and having leaders committed to improving trade within the continent will be part of the recipe for actualizing Agenda 2063.
By closing borders, you can only trade amongst yourselves. Whereas if you are a producer of something strong that others want, coffee for example, and you trade it with others who produce something else, then you can have some trade. If you allow yourselves to trade, then both of you can get farther ahead. That's the old theory of comparative advantage, focusing on what you do best and then trading with others so that both of you can be better off.
I think it's fair to say Africa is finding its own integration model. It's a model based on different regions coalescing together around a Pan-African region. I think two ingredients would be essential. One is to be clear about what Africa is looking for, to be clear that there is a political energy behind this, to make sure that leaders are committed, not just convinced, but committed to addressing the obstacles to intra-Africa trade.
Over and above trade, experts stress the need for inclusion of all stakeholders in the economic value chain, particularly women and the youth who have been traditionally left out.
Clearly, the argument is that supporting women is not a charity case. It is about strengthening economies, but first it is the right thing to do. But it is about inclusive economic development. It is about growing and strengthening our economies. And it's about addressing inequality. So in order for us to address all of these things that most of us are very passionate about, most governments feel strong about, we've got to get to the women's question, because we will not be able to have economies that are inclusive, economies that address inequalities, and economies that address poverty if we don't involve of women and position them strategically in our economies.
Women have always had the big share of the development part of it. What I think we are seeing is eventually being able for women to continue to be dynamic as they have always been, but also making sure that all the barriers that are there, be it the mindset, be it the financial access, be it the all complexities around how we even engage men itself, or even women being a part of the financial conversation. Because oftentimes discussions are there and women are not there. So we are hoping between now and then the participation will be more real, and we see women, then we eventually see the women really engaging meaningfully.
Also a hot topic at the meeting was linking markets across the continent and how this will fast-track its development.
Markets in Africa are too small, so there needs to be a process of integration. Tear down those barriers. Start with connectivity. Start with making sure that you facilitate border trade. Start with eliminating all these amounts of red tape and multiple check and border checks that don't really add to security or safety, but add a lot to bureaucracy and costs.
Africa will grow when businesses, no matter how small, learn to consolidate their funds into a pool and then expand and do things together. And you know that you are better off being a 20% shareholder of a $100,000 business or $10,000 business than being a 100% shareholder of a $1,000 business. So those are the kind of choices people have to make.
Despite all the prosperity prospects the continent has, there are issues that have to be addressed.
There are pockets in Africa where the security situation is not good. While Africa in general has made tremendous strides in governance and having peaceful transitions of government, we cannot take stability for a given. I think we need to be aware of the possible fragility as well. So that's what worries me the most about Africa. But that doesn't deter us. We've been here for 150 years. We have seen a lot of coups, a lot of revolutions, a lot of problems, and we are still here and fighting hard.
But I think more important than that is to reduce the cost of doing business. It takes a long time to move goods from the coast to Rwanda, for example, from Mombasa to Rwanda. These costs have to be reduced, and for that we need infrastructure, road, rail, and air. So all matters of infrastructure of that sort open up markets and allow people here to trade with outsiders.
And what are some of the desires that Africans have for Africa?
By 2063, I would like to see an Africa with non-tariff barriers, with limited or zero corruption, and with leaders that have encouraged us and seen us being innovative, an innovative continent. I'd really love to see an innovative continent.
I think the future is bright, and I'm delighted that everybody is beginning to see agriculture as a business. And I think as that happens, whether you're in the seed sector or fertilizer sector, storage sector, warehousing, logistics, or actually even in financing, you can see that this is the sector that is central to inclusive growth in Africa.
I think the African Development Bank is making strides in reflecting on changes in the business model it has. It is time to know that the donor community doesn't have the money that is needed. It is time also to recognize that private sector is able to do many things. Therefore, there's to be a public-private partnership-oriented model that comes in the future. It requires the bank to change many of its operating procedures and even aim at more and more lending to the private sector. So I think that's a good sign that the bank is actually listening to what it should do, thinking about how to reform itself, and setting up new initiatives that will meet the new needs for Africa.
With the curtains closing in on the 50th African Development Bank annual meeting, from undertones of the attendees, it is evident that Rwanda has set the pace for trade facilitation. In September this year, the International Trade Center is another major institution that hopes to celebrate its anniversary in Rwanda.
On our 50th anniversary, we thought, where do we do our annual event, our big annual gathering? We had never done it in these 50 years in Africa. So in taking over my position as executive director last year in September, I thought it cannot be that we've not done this in Africa. So we must bring this big event gathering policymakers and business to Rwanda.
This goes to show that Rwanda is ready for economic takeoff and other African countries should take notes.
I think it really shows how Rwanda is growing and developing, and it shows that the rest of Africa, the rest of the world, is also realizing that there's a new Rwanda and wanting to see this new Rwanda, wanting to be a part of this new Rwanda. So it's really great because, you know, we've been saying this for a while, but then this is actual evidence of the changes that our country has experienced over the past few years.
I think Rwanda has a huge growth trajectory. It's growing over and above neighboring countries. It's growing over and above other African countries. But I think Rwanda is extremely committed to sharing this growth with its neighbors, within the East African community, but beyond that. And I think this is good news because a market of 11 Rwandans is too small, but a big market of the East African community, that's when we can start talking business.
One of the lessons I learned from the 50th annual African Development Bank meeting is that African leaders and Africans at large have a role to play in a bid to meet the Agenda 2063. Now that brings us to the end of this week's program. For stories we featured on this and previous Doing Business in Report episodes, visit our website, cnbcafrica.com, and please remember to bookmark it. You can also follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @DBIR360. I am your host, Lois Washira, and from the rest of the Doing Business in Rwanda team, let's keep the conversation going about the Africa you and I want.